everybody, welcome to Facebook Live with Missouri Star. As you probably know, I am not Misty, the lovely Misty, or am I Jenny? I'm Courtney. I work in the Education Center here in town, and I am here today to show you how to make this beautiful quilt behind me. It's the Leah collection by In the Beginning Fabrics. It's using this beautiful stripe fabric here on the border. If you've ever done a One Block Wonder or a Stack and Whack quilt, it's kind of along the same lines. But they're having you use the pattern of a stripe. So we're going to be working with a stripe, and then you're going to get these wonderful blocks in the middle. Here's another one without the stripe. You'll have 6 blocks that have the stripe around the border. You'll have 2 blocks that are just the white around the border, and then you'll have some partial blocks in there as well. And then we have some little bit of a blue and white print that'll go around the edge of the blocks. I'll show you how to do that. These look a lot harder than they are, but I'm going to walk you through it. Who do we have with us today?
Today we have people joining from Melrose Park, Illinois.
All right.
From the west of Ireland.
Ooh, Ireland.
Alberta, Canada. Thanks, guys, for joining us on Missouri Star Live.
Thanks for coming and watching me do this. So what you'll need for this kit, or what you'll need for this quilt, is you'll need 8 1/4 yards of the stripe fabric. We've already cut that for you. So actually I cut some last week actually. So we've got those ready for you to purchase in your 8 1/4 yard chunks. That is giving you about 8 inches extra. So you'll be great ordering that 8 1/4, and that will cover the blocks as well as the stripe. So that's plenty of fabric. You don't need any more than that. And then you'll also need a yard. The pattern calls for 1 2/3 of this little blueprint right here. But we'll cut you 1 3/4 yards for you, and that'll cover your blocks and your binding. And then all you'll need is backing. So when you get your fabric from us, you are going to get 1 long 8 1/4 yard piece of fabric. And that is pretty unruly to work with. I had to fold it, trust me, and cram it in a little bag, and that was fun. And my pieces that I'm working with here are not that long, and they're not even the 2 2/3 yards that you're going to need. I cut mine down to about 1 yard, so it's easier to show you all how to do this. So this is what the stripe looks like. It's very pretty. It's a beautiful fabric. It's very soft. So this is your stripe, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to cut a 2 2/3 yards cut off of the big long strip. And then you're going to cut a second piece that's 2 2/3. And then your last piece is going to be about 2 3/4. That's for the border. Put that off to the side so you don't hack into that before you need to, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to cut our strips off of here. So let's see, I'll make sure I have my right piece. Okay, so I'm going to lay mine out. I'm a right-hander. Okay, so actually I'm going to lay it the other way. I knew I was going to do this the wrong way. So I'm going to lay my piece here out on my mat. And I'm going to grab my glasses because I can't see. Okay, so what they have us doing, or have you doing, or I did, you are going to cut 3/4 of an inch below the lowest part of the stripe. So if you can see right here, I'm running this ruler. Each of my little orange lines are 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to line that 3/4 of an inch right on the bottom of all of these, the bottom of my stripe here. I'm not worried about the top part yet. I'm just cutting the strip at the bottom. I'm going to cut there. I'm going to pull it towards me. I'm going to lay the ruler down again.
Courtney, while you're cutting, we have a couple people asking, can this quilt be bigger? And I think the idea is you could make it bigger if you put 2 together, but you can also always make a quilt bigger just by adding more borders. And there's beautiful fabric in this line to add more borders.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a great idea. Okay. So there is 1 strip cut. So you're going to need to cut 4 strips on this piece, and you're going to need to cut 4 strips on your second piece to get you a total of 8 strips, okay? So once you get your strip cut, you are going to need to cut this into the correct height for the ruler that you have. Now, the ruler that we are using here, the Kaleido ruler that we are using here is by Marty Michelle. And it's kind of hard. I'm laying it on the fabric here so you can see. And it's the Kaleido ruler. So these blocks are 16-inch blocks, and it says to cut my strips 8.5 inches. Your Kaleidoscope ruler, if you have a different brand, may tell you a different size of strip to cut. So just pay attention to the ruler that you are using to make sure you're cutting the correct strip height. Now again, my strip height that I need to cut is 8.5 inches. There's a few ways to do this. Now again, like I told you, your strip sets are going to be much longer. So here comes an issue of how do you, I'm going to start at the very easiest, the one way to do it where you could be very accurate. Again, we're going with the stripe. When you're cutting these now into your 8.5 inch strips, make sure, one, you don't cut into your fabric. You're going to want to make sure that your stripe is to the left because you're going to be cutting off the background. So and make sure you do that because I did start cutting one on the wrong side. So just try to always be aware that your stripe has to be to the left. Now the one way you can do this to cut 8.5 inches, because if you lay your fabric out straight this way, you don't have any, it's too long this way to use the numbers on your mat. So you can take I've got a 6-inch ruler and a little 2-inch. So you can lay those together, or a 2-inch, that's not a 2-inch ruler. It's a 5x12 ruler. But I'm using the 6-inch ruler width here, and then I need 2.5 inch here. And then you can just start at the bottom of this strip and cut that into 8.5 inches. And you can do this to all eight strips, okay? Or you can be very careful and fold your strip in half and in half again. Now, the one thing you want to be careful of, you want to make sure that your fold is very flat here. You also want to make sure that your fold is going to be very flat here. If you don't make sure that that fold is flat, you're going to end up with a strip with dog legs, okay? It'll look like a dog's hind leg and you're going to get waves in it. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that everything is nice and flat down at these folds. I'm going to make sure that all of my edges are lined up pretty here. Got one that's not so. There we go. You behave, you little rascal. Okay. And now I can use my 24-inch ruler, just go over here and cut off my 8.5 inch strip. And that way you can still use the mat and the numbers on the mat. Let me make sure I'm cutting that. Yep. 8.5, 8.5. It's hard. This is a 6-inch ruler, and now I'm using 6.5 inch, so I'm getting thrown by that other 1/2 inch here. And be careful at home if you switch between a 6 and a 6.5 inch ruler. I've done it and cut stuff wrong. Trust me, if you can do it, I've done it.
Courtney, as people are just joining us, I want to remind people this is a smaller cut than you will have. You'll have an 8 1/4 yard cut for this stripe, and then you'll have cut it down. And what Courtney's showing us now is how to cut down those stripes so that they're usable to now cut into those triangles that will get us those beautiful kaleidoscopes behind her on the quilt.
Yes. So once you get all of your strips cut, you are going to lay all 8, one on top of one another, as close as you can get, kind of matching the motifs below it. Now I'm going to show you on this big piece of fabric. We're going to act like this is all in strips, okay? What the end of your fabric might look like. So my first 4 cuts started here. My second 4 cuts look like this. So when we lay them out to cut, that's okay. We're just going to move this over to make it all pretty. And you might have this much hanging off. That's totally fine. And then once we start cutting, you're not going to start cutting till you're past that. So you don't need to worry about that. And again, you have enough fabric to make sure that this is hanging off. Don't worry. But just come in to make sure we get through all the layers. But I wanted to show you that it can be that much off on the print. So between the 2 cuts that you made.
And
but
even
don't
if
panic.
it is that much off, that's okay, because that 8 1/4 yards is plenty.
Yes,
right?
ma'am. Yep.
Okay, one other question we have is, will there be a printed pattern for this? Guys, in the description box There is a link to the pattern and to the yardage for this quilt.
All right, so I've got my 8 lined up. Now the pins that I like to use for this is these flathead pins, these little flathead guys. And there are 2 reasons why I like the flathead pins. One is they're nice and long and they'll get through all 8 layers. The other is they will lay flat against my fabric. So when I go to trim my triangles, my ruler won't be shaking underneath a round point, okay? So I'm going to take a point on my fabric that is very obvious. I want something that's meeting. So I'm going to go in right here where those 2 flower petals meet, and I'm going to go in there, and then I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to go here. And I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to go here. And I'm doing this through all 8 layers, okay?
And Courtney, can you tell us why there's 8 layers?
There are 8 layers because we're making an octagon. So in this
Good
pattern,
answer.
a lot of one block wonders are hexes or 6-sided. This is an 8-sided. So now that I have that 1 pin in, I'm going to hold it, my thumb on the top and my 2 fingers on either side of the pin on the bottom, and I'm just going to kind of shake that a little bit. Still watching my stripe. Okay, kind of relining that stripe up nice. So my pin is now perpendicular to the fabric. Perpendicular. I like saying that. Perpendicular. Sounds like I'm smart because I used a big word. Perpendicular. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to take the smallest bite I can out of all 8 layers of fabric with this pin next to the pin that I used, and I'm going to come back up next to the pin, and then I'm going to take that one out. Okay. And I'm going to do this, the more you pin, the better it goes, okay, the more accurate it is. So now I'm going to pick, let's see, I'm going to go a little over from there. I'm going to go right here where this purple meets the white in that blue line. This is probably the longest part of this quilt, honestly, because the triangles are nice and big. The sewing of the actual triangles went very quickly, but the more you pin, the happier you're going to be. Okay, I just had to recheck.
So if you're just joining us, I'm going to recap where we're at so far. So we're making the quilt behind us. It's the Leah collection from In the Beginning Fabrics. And this quilt has a pattern and a yardage of 8 1/4 yards of that stripe. And that makes the whole quilt. There's just a little bit of a coordinate in the center of those little squares that you can see. And so what Courtney is teaching us is how to cut that stripe fabric down and then turn it into the triangles that we'll be using to make those octagons in the center. So this pinning technique is also, it's a little tricky at first, but you get the hang of it because you're going to do plenty of it. And we have a tips and tricks downloadable, printable in the description as well. So all the hints that Courtney is sharing to how to make this quilt nice and easy are in that right there in the description box.
The other thing I want to point out is in the pattern, they have these pins going horizontally. I put them vertically because this ruler, I don't have a whole lot of room up here. If I were to put these horizontally, I'm going to be hitting a pin quite often. So I decided I'm going to go vertically and perpendicular. Ooh, aren't I just all that today? No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to pick another point. I'll just do one more pin for those that are joining late. I'm looking at very obvious places where fabric meets. Okay. I'm doing this little vine part. I'm going through all 8 layers. The other thing is with this fabric, let me mention that while I'm pinning, you do not want to pre-wash this fabric, okay? And that hurt me because I am a pre-washer. And I know we can get in a whole thing about pre-washing and not do whatever you want, but if you are a pre-washer, normally please do not pre-wash this. And I think with most One Block Wonder quilts, you do not pre-wash. It can distort the fabric print a little bit, so it's extra hard to line it up. So you just want it to come off the bolt. Yes, I'm going to tell you to starch it pretty well. I did not starch these as heavy as I normally would, but I would starch them. We're going to be sewing a lot of bias. Jenny is very, very good at sewing with bias and not stretching it. I am not. I'm very rough with my fabric, so I want it to behave, and I'm going to use, I usually just use Faultless starch. Best Press to me isn't heavy enough. I would like my fabric really stiff and not going anywhere, so I prefer Faultless or Niagara or whatever you can find. Use now whatever you have at home. Don't go running out to buy anything, but just use what you have. Okay.
And as you're finishing up that, there's also a couple questions. The pattern is available in that link. It is a pattern from In the Beginning Fabrics for this particular quilt. The PDF download that's in our links is our tips and tricks sheet.
I'm going to go one more pin because I want to show at least how to do 2 triangles. So I'm going to pin one more time. Watching paint dry with Courtney. It's a Tuesday. Is everybody having good weather where you are? We've got pretty nice today. It's 70 some degrees. It's kind of muggy because we're supposed to get storms later, but at least the sun is shining for now. Yay. Gotta love the sun.
Yeah, and Courtney, when you're done pinning that, can you show us a little bit of a close-up of that ruler, the Kaleido ruler that you're using?
Yes, I will do that because we're going to lay that out and do that next.
Awesome.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. And there's going to be a link for the ruler in your, below this as well. So, alrighty. So I've got a couple pins in. Do the whole strip. I'm not doing the whole strip because you don't need to be that bored today. But I wanted to get a couple done so you can see how I'm going to cut 2 of the triangles for you. Okay. All right. So the ruler I'm using is, and it's hard to see on here, so I'm going to put it on here, I guess. It's the Marty Michelle. It's the Kaleido ruler, large one, because I can get the 16-inch block on here. I marked the bottom where the 8.5 inches is with just a piece of tape, just so. But it is the bottom line. I probably didn't need to, but it's just kind of a better guideline here. So I'm going to start over at the edge here. And I am going to go as far over as I can, making sure I get all 8 layers. Now this is kind of, I would probably go back and put another pin in here. But again, I'm not going to bore you. Because this isn't lining up. If you can see that, it's not lining up so great at the bottom. So I would probably put a pin in here and get those strips nice and even at the bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to muscle those into shape right now. And then we're going to lay, if you lay your ruler down, I'm lining up the bottom with the 8.5 inch mark here, and it says for the 16-inch block. And then at the top of the ruler, there it should be even with the top of the strip. Now, you don't need the ruler in the pattern. They do have a template that you can cut out. What I would recommend, you can cut it out of cardboard, or if you have template plastic, go ahead and use that. Do not cut around those, however, especially if it's template plastic, because your ruler or your cutter may sliver off pieces of that template plastic, and then it won't be accurate anymore. So I would use, in this case, I would suggest the Frixion pen because you're going to be cutting that off, and it'll be in the seam allowance if you don't quite get it off. But normally I would not use that on the tops of my fabrics, but here you can because we're going to be cutting it off. And then you can just, if you were to pin that, if you were to put a line on your fabric, then just put your ruler here. I'm also going to show you how to do this side without coming back at you with the blade. So I have, for this project, I like the large blade because it'll go through the 8 layers of fabric. A little bit easier than the smaller blade, but if you have a smaller blade, go ahead and switch the blade out. Make sure you have a nice new blade in it, okay? Now I'm going to run my fingers up either side of the ruler, hoping I don't stab myself, and just making sure there's no pin there because you don't want to run over a pin because there goes your brand new blade, right? So I'm just running there. I think I'm good. And I'm going to go up this side. And then I never want to see you do this. Please don't do that. That is an accident waiting to happen. So I'm going to lay this ruler right up next to there. Move this out of the way. And then go up that way. And that's a great way whenever I have to do any kind of ruler worked with that. I always use the second ruler because I know me. So please don't ever come back to yourself with the rotary cutter. Just use another ruler. Surely, I know you all have more than one ruler in your stash, okay? So here we're going, and then for the next cut, I'm going to do this, and then we're going to go over, there's a couple different ways to cut these too, and I'm going to go over that. So I'm getting ready to run my finger up. This pin is in the way, so I'm just going to go ahead and take that pin out right now. And then this will go just upside down. And then you're just going to flip-flop this all the way down your strip until you get, you need, let's see, 1, 6, you'll need six triangles with the stripe at the bottom, and you'll need 8 with the triangle with the little part at the top. So you'll need 8 that look like this, and you'll need 6 triangles that look like that. Now, one of the ways that they say the other ways you can cut this is you can do all 8 strips one at a time. How I would do that is I would have template plastic, and I'd pick a strip that I like, draw around the motif generally to see where to cut it, lay that template plastic on there and cut. I don't have time to do that, so I just did it this way. The other way you can do it is if you have these awesome rulers. These are awesome rulers. This is a mirror, in case anybody's wondering. You can lay that mirror on your fabric and see what your octagon's going to look like. Okay, and you can move it down until you get one to say, oh, that's really cool. Now, to make sure you have enough fabric to do that, I would go ahead and make, or draw, you can draw 14 of these. And then every time you see a good one you like, lay it down and pin it. And then make sure you have the 8 and the 6, and then you know you have enough fabric. I would not just start doing this and go, oh, I like this, lay your ruler down and cut, because you may end up cutting off some of the fabric you need. So I would have this and just lay it down so I know. And just pin it through all the layers and do your whole 2 2/3 inch pieces and make sure you get all your parts. Okay?
So those are some other good tips for doing this, and we do recommend the first method. And want to go back to, can you show us that trick for the second ruler again so you're not cutting towards yourself? Because that was really valuable.
Yes. So I'm going to just whack that off. Oh, that's pretty without a blade. So this is the end of our strip sets, okay? So we're going to line this up. I'm going as far over as I can, making sure that I get through all 8 layers, okay? And then you're going to, now I haven't pinned this, so the bottom looks very bad. So, but I am going to check for pins. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go here, then I'm going to bring the second ruler in and lean it right up against that ruler. Pull that away. And this buckled here because it wasn't pinned, okay? But that is, I love that. And my table is not this big, but it's up against a window, so I can't go around and come back the other side. I have no option.
You is always a bad idea. So
yes.
Thank you.
All right, so I have once you're ready to do your triangles, we are ready to sew your strip sets. And I would go ahead and once you cut your triangles, just go ahead and throw the pin back in, and this will keep them all together. Okay, and then you can play with them and see. You can lay them down. Well, you won't be able to. Let me get these out that I did. Oh, that's going to be fun. Look at that. Fun.
And one of the cool things is that this is always going to be a little bit of a surprise, right? Like you can't really tell what it's going to look like.
Unless you use the mirror.
Unless you use the mirror.
Yeah. I rogue it. It's like it is what it's going to look like. So yours will not look like the quilt behind me. Yours will look like something different depending on where your 8 1/8 cut was when we cut it off the bolt, and depend on where you cut your triangles. So this is what this block's going to look like. So that's pretty fun. I love it, actually. I love that. I love the daisies. So that's fun. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew those into sets of 2. That's how they show you on this block. Okay, so we're going to sew this one to this one, this one to that one, this one to that one, and this one to that one. Okay, And I'll show, I've got one started over here, so we'll go to the machine. I just have it on 2.5, thought I had dropped a pin. I just have it on my regular 2.5 stitch length. I didn't do anything fancy. I did not, I'm not pinning here because they're short, but if you wanted to, you could pin where those lines meet. So you can put a little pin in there. Sometimes if you have lines, you want to match those up. This is kind of, it's such a pretty fabric with the watercolory. It's not too specific, so it's not too fussy, which is great. So I'm just going to line those two up just like that, and I'm going to sew along that edge with a 1/4 inch seam. If I can find the foot pedal. Minor detail. So there is one 1/4 of my block. So we're going to switch out now to this. So you're going to have these quarters, and what you are going to do is you're going to press the seams for all 4 of these going in a counterclockwise direction. And then once you sew this seam, those 2 seams will nest real pretty. And then you'll sew down that middle seam. You'll get a piece that looks like this. And then this whole thing will sew together, and you'll have your block almost. Then the other thing in your pattern, they have you do they have a pattern piece for a template for this triangle piece here. Okay. All this is a 5.5 inch square cut and 1/2 on the diagonal. I am not using a template for that. So I just cut 29 inch squares, cut them in 1/2 on the diagonal, and you've got these pieces, okay? Goes a lot faster.
Let me pause you. Can you show us a few more of the triangle sets you've got? Because we were seeing people are realizing, yes, when you cut it, it's totally going to look different. Each one is going to look different from the next.
Yep.
And they super look pretty, guys.
Here's this one. Glad I didn't throw them on the floor. Because that was my temptation. I almost did it. So there's the other one. So how fun. That one's not. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. So there's that one. Woo!
And when you're pinning these, you're using those flower top flathead pins?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'm using the flathead pins, and these just happen to have moons and stars on the top. Okay. I think there's all different brands out there.
Types. And that's so that when you put that ruler down, it's not bumping up as hard as it would if there was like a regular pin head, right? So
right, correct.
You've got that flatter so you can make the easier cut.
Correct. And this is the block with the stripe in the middle. So you get a totally different look. So that's when it has the pretty, whatever this flower is. I love that. The hydrangea is in here. So that's what that block looks like. So it's really fun to see what you're going to end up with, right? Okay, so we've got our block here. Now we need to make some corners, okay? And that's what what these are for. Once this is all sewn together, you're just going to lay this right on top of this block here, flip it and sew it. Let's get it right on the right angle because that looked funny. Sorry, you guys. It was looking funny. Flip and sew there, flip and sew in that corner, flip and sew there, and there's your block. So you actually have square blocks, which this quilt does not look like it has square blocks at all. So I love that. I think that's, it's just great. So you are going to need 6 of these that look like this. You're going to need some partial blocks. You'll have partial blocks that are on the sides and the corners, and the layout diagram is in your pattern. Let me show you what those blocks are going to look like. And these look really strange, I'll tell you right now. When I was sewing them together, I was like, you want me to do what? So here's another block that I already sewed with the corners on, okay? So that's cool too. I love this, the little bit of yellow in there too. That's fun. So there's that one. Then look at that. Is that the oddest block you've ever seen? But this block goes over here. And then you're going to cut this off. You're going to cut down that piece. So don't fret. I know it looks very strange, but that's what those are for. These are for the sides. And then you're going to do a block that looks like this, kind of a halvesy block. And those are up in the corner. I can't quite reach, but those will go up in the corner. And those you'll just need 4 of. So that's all you need, and it's all straight seams. There's no inset seams in this at all.
And that's all those instructions are in the pattern, and that's linked in the description.
Yep.
And so we've got all these tips and tricks to help you out make this beautiful quilt behind you.
Yep.
If you have any more questions for Courtney, we have room for about 1 or 2 more questions.
Question me up.
Okay. So some people are asking, can any repeating pattern be used? So this particular pattern is specifically for this particular stripe. This is the Leah collection quilt. You could use this same method for different stripes.
You certainly could.
That's true.
Yeah.
So it's
That'd be great fun.
It's not something you would never do again.
Right. Yes, you definitely could use. And a lot of times we walk into stores and we see all these pretty stripes, and then we're like, what do we do with them? You know, and how many, I mean, I am guilty as well. I've done 8,000 striped table runners. And now I'm ready to move on, but it's always a good thing. But this is a great, you know, if you really love the fabric, it's a great way to use it.
Yeah.
So.
And could you show us having that one block that you've got finished there? Could you hold that up to the quilt too so we can see how that works?
Absolutely. So this goes right in there. And that goes right there. So it gets pieced on the diagonal.
Right.
But just lay it out on the floor and do one little row at a time to make sure.
So folks who are asking how that square in the middle happens, it's just that triangle on the corner of the octagon that ends up forming that square as the blocks come together.
This would be the one, this would be actually the full one without the stripe. The stripe doesn't go there, but that's how that goes. So there's no, yeah. Nice and easy. And then you put your border on your binding, you're done. Yeah.
All right. So thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today on Missouri Star Live. Thanks for joining us, Courtney.
Thanks for having me, guys. I hope everybody's well, and we'll see you soon. Bye.